What if I told you that some of the biggest black music legends in history, men who ruled stadiums, top charts, and commanded millions, were brought to their knees not by critics, not by rivals, but by the women they trusted most? Behind the fame, the fortune, and the spotlight, there were bedroom doors that opened to betrayal, secrets buried for decades, and careers that never recovered. This is 21 black celebrities who caught their wives cheating. Stay with us until the end, because the number one story is more shocking than you could ever imagine. Johnnie Taylor, the night the Pharaoh fell. Johnnie Taylor wasn't just a soul singer. He was Memphis royalty. In the 1970s, they called him the Pharaoh of Soul. Gold records on the wall, sold-out theaters, flashbulbs exploding every time he stepped out with his wife, Jillian, the quiet woman who stood beside him like a diamond no one could crack. On stage, he ruled. At home, he believed he was safe. But fame has a rhythm, and it rarely plays in harmony with marriage. Weeks on tour turn into months of absence. 3 weeks gone. 4 weeks without a call. Johnny drowned himself in cognac and backstage applause, convincing himself that providing was the same thing as loving. Meanwhile, in the silence of their Memphis home, Jillian's loneliness grew teeth. The tour manager, young, attentive, always around, became the comfort Johnny didn't realize she was starving for. Then came May 4th, 1980. A canceled show, a spontaneous decision. Johnny drove through the night, smiling at the thought of surprising her. At 2:17 a.m., he unlocked the apartment door. The air felt wrong. A stranger's cologne lingered like an accusation. A man's striped shirt draped casually over the chair. He didn't need to open the bedroom door, but he did. Time stopped. Jillian, the woman who once held his hand at award shows, lay wrapped around another man. No screaming at first. No chaos. Just a silence, so heavy it crushed the oxygen out of his lungs. When she looked at him, there was no panic, only surrender. You thought you could buy love? That sentence hit harder than anything. Johnny grabbed their wedding photo from a nightstand and stared at the smiling couple trapped inside the glass. Then he smashed it on the floor. The sound echoed like the end of an empire. By sunrise, he was alone in a Holiday Inn, pouring drink after drink, trying to convince himself it wasn't real. By the next morning, he was on the phone with his lawyer. The divorce gutted him. $250,000 gone. The house gone. Headlines mocking him. But the final blow came months later. A DNA test revealing his youngest son wasn't his. That was the night Johnnie Taylor didn't just lose a wife. He lost his identity. Alcohol took the wheel. Columbia Records suspended his contract. Radio stations stopped spinning his songs. The Pharaoh of Soul, once untouchable, staggered through whispers and shame. Here's the truth. Johnny didn't fall the night he opened that bedroom door. He fell long before, the moment he mistook applause for intimacy. And in the end, the loudest silence of his life wasn't on stage. It was the sound of his own home, without him. Teddy Pendergrass, the parking lot that changed everything. Teddy Pendergrass didn't just sing love songs. He was a fantasy. Velvet voice, tailored suits, women screaming his name like prayer. When he walked offstage in Philadelphia on February 12, 1980, the air still vibrated from the encore. Another sold-out show. Another kingdom conquered. He should have been untouchable. At 11:20 p.m., he crossed the Hilton parking lot toward his Cadillac Fleetwood. That's when he noticed the interior light glowing faintly. He assumed Karen, his young, beautiful wife, was waiting for him. Maybe she wanted to celebrate. Maybe she wanted to remind him that he was hers. Then he saw it. Black lace stockings hanging out the car door, brushing the cold pavement. Something inside him tightened. He stepped closer and peered through the glass. Karen wasn't waiting. She was straddling his tour manager, her hands tangled in the man's hair. His hand disappeared beneath her dress. They were kissing like the world had ended, like Teddy Pendergrass had never existed. For a split second, the king of Quiet Storm couldn't breathe. Then the door flew open. Karen gasped. The manager froze. The parking lot went silent. Teddy's voice didn't tremble. It cracked with something darker. You made me a clown in front of my own crew. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. Public, raw, stripped of dignity. He dragged her out of the car. The red dress slipped from her shoulder. He threw it to the ground like a discarded costume. The side mirror shattered when he slammed the door, the only sound brave enough to echo what was breaking inside him. 2 weeks later, he filed for divorce. The tabloids devoured the story. He locked himself away in hotel rooms, replaying the scene in his head. But the real tragedy was still ahead. 5 weeks later, March 18th. Rain pouring, Teddy behind the wheel of his Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit. They say in the split second before impact, your life flashes before your eyes. Some say as did. The car slammed into a utility pole. When they pulled him from the wreckage, his spine was shattered. From the chest down, he would never move again. The album was canceled. The tours collapsed. The man who once commanded bodies with a whisper was trapped inside his own. Maybe the crash was just an accident. Or maybe, as Teddy would later confess to friends, part of him felt like his life had already ended the night he opened that Cadillac door. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't just break your heart. It changes your destiny. James Brown's 7 seconds. James Brown built his empire on control. On stage, he was electricity in human form. Spins, screams, sweat flying under hot lights. The godfather of funk didn't stumble. He commanded. He demanded. He dominated. But on April 14th, 1981, control slipped through his fingers in exactly 7 seconds. By the early 80s, James was unraveling behind the curtain. Painkillers, liquor, weeks disappearing on tour. His wife, Adrian, was left orbiting his world, close enough to feel the heat, far enough to freeze in the loneliness. Rumors reached him first. Midnight band meetings, locked hotel doors, laughter too loud, too late. He ignored them. Until 1:15 a.m. at the Marriott in Augusta, he returned from a show, alcohol still burning in his throat. The hallway was quiet, but beneath Adrienne's door, yellow light spilled onto the carpet. Disco music faded abruptly, like someone had yanked the plug. He tried the handle. Locked. Fury rose fast and violent. James slammed his shoulder into the door. Once, twice, the hinge snapped, and there it was. Adrienne on the bed, white nightgown bunched around her waist. A young dancer tangled in the sheets beside her. Champagne open. Lipstick smeared glasses. A pair of silver men's briefs mocking him from the floor. James Brown stood frozen. 1, 2, 3, 7 seconds. That's how long it took for a legend to break. Then he roared, not like a performer, but like a wounded animal. He grabbed the champagne bottle and hurled it against the wall. Foam exploded, dripping down the wallpaper like something rotten finally exposed. Get out of my bed. He didn't argue, didn't negotiate. He walked into the hallway and called his lawyer from the wall phone. Filed the papers. Now, the divorce in 1982 cost him over $600,000 and a South Carolina home. But the real damage wasn't financial. It was public. The Atlanta Journal ran the story for weeks. The mystery dancer became gossip currency. The godfather of funk reduced to punchlines. After that, James spiraled. Arrests, assault charges, shows canceled, records flopped. Even his own son told reporters, he doesn't deserve to be called a man. For the rest of his life, James never trusted fully again. Here's the cruel irony. The man who could make an arena move on command couldn't stop 7 silent seconds from destroying his world. Because sometimes it's not the scream that ruins you. It's the moment you realize you weren't in control at all. Rick James, the most expensive silence. Rick James lived like excess was oxygen. Fur coats in summer. Limousines at sunrise. Cocaine thickened the air of every studio session. He didn't just write hits, he embodied chaos. And he believed chaos answered him. Until September 19th, 1982. It was 2 a.m. in Los Angeles when Rick staggered back into his private studio, half high, chasing a bass line stuck in his head. That room was sacred. It was where Super Freak was born, where platinum dreams turned into reality. The door wasn't locked. That was the first sign. The smell hit him before the sight did. Vodka, sweat, perfume. A camera light still blinking red in the corner, recording. Then he saw her. Tanya, his wife. nearly 20 years younger, kneeling on the gray velvet couch where he once wrote his biggest hit. Two naked dancers surrounded her, one gripping her shoulders from behind, the other pulling her hair back, mouth pressed to her neck. Condoms scattered across the floor like confetti after a party no one invited him to. The vodka bottle had spilled onto the mixing board, liquor dripping slowly toward his boots. Rick James, the man who never froze, stood still. Is this real? Tanya noticed him. Her hand scrambled for a towel. She started to speak. He didn't let her. What the hell are you doing in my studio? The word might cracked like a whip. He kicked over the control desk. Glass shattered. The camera tipped sideways. For a second, the only sound was his breathing, sharp animal, humiliated. But Rick James wasn't just a husband. He was a brand. And brands don't bleed publicly. Within the hour, he was downstairs pulling a metal briefcase from the trunk of his Cadillac. Contracts. Contacts. Power. He called his longtime tour manager and demanded 2 bodyguards. By 3 a.m., 3 checks sat on the table, $75,000 each. Silence agreements. Sign or be destroyed. They signed. Tanya left wrapped in a towel and legal obligation. The dancers stared at the floor. The tape was secured. The story buried. From that night forward, Rick never called her by name again. He called her that expensive mistake. On stage, nothing changed. Glittering boots, wild screams, women reaching for him like he was immortal. But inside, something had calcified. Here's the thing about humiliation. You can pay to hide it. You can threaten it into silence. You can bury it under stacks of cash. But you can't unsee it. Rick James controlled the narrative. He just couldn't control the memory. And sometimes the most expensive loss is the one no one is allowed to talk about. Marvin Gaye, the song that wasn't about love. Marvin Gaye sang like he understood every shade of love, tender, aching, sacred. When he married Anna Gordy, sister of Motown's founder, the union looked like destiny. The golden voice and the golden empire. Power, prestige, perfection. But behind the silk suits and studio lights, Marvin was unraveling. By 1973, addiction had taken hold. Cocaine, alcohol, paranoia. He would vanish for weeks, then return suspicious, volatile, accusing Anna betrayals that didn't exist. At least not yet. Loneliness has a way of becoming prophecy. The young guitarist entered quietly, talented, bold, and worst of all, dismissive. He openly called Marvin a washed-up junkie in front of the crew, disrespect that would have once earned him exile. Instead, he earned access. September 15th, 1975. Late night at Marvin's Sunset Boulevard studio. The door was slightly open. Music floated out. Soft soul layered with drunken laughter. Marvin pushed it wider. Anna was sitting on the guitarist's lap, her dress hiked high on her thighs, one hand sliding through his hair, kissing him with a hunger Marvin hadn't seen directed at him in years. There was no dramatic gasp, no screaming, just silence. Marvin stood there, watching the woman who once abandoned Broadway dreams to stand beside him. Look at another man like he was salvation. He grabbed a beer can from the table and hurled it against the wall. Foam exploded across the studio glass. The guitarist jumped back. Anna froze. Marvin didn't say a word. He turned around and walked out, slamming the door behind him like he was sealing a tomb. The divorce dragged into 1976. The settlement was brutal. To cover alimony, Marvin surrendered the royalties of his next album. Every note, every lyric, every dollar, gone before it was even born. But Marvin didn't give the world silence. He gave them Here, My Dear. An album so raw, so bitter, so unfiltered, didn't sound like the man who once whispered, "Let's get on." It sounded like someone dissecting his own heartbreak under studio lights. Critics were confused. Fans were uncomfortable. Because this wasn't romance. It was autopsy. Here's the truth about Marvin Gaye. He didn't just lose a wife. He lost the illusion that love would save him from himself. And the man who once made millions believe in intimacy ended up writing the loneliest record of his life. Sometimes the most painful love songs aren't written for the world. They're written because there's nothing left to say at home. Miles Davis, The Lamp That Shattered the Silence. Miles Davis didn't chase applause. He bent sound to his will. One breath through a trumpet, and the world held still. Kinda Blue made him immortal. Cool, distant, untouchable. But on November 12, 1968, silence betrayed him louder than any wrong note ever could. He'd been gone for months. Tours, late nights, heroin fog, the endless escape that genius sometimes demands. Frances Taylor had once given up Broadway at its peak to be his wife. She traded stage lights for his shadow. But shadows grow cold. That night, Miles returned to their Central Park West apartment. The hallway was dim, the bedroom door slightly open. He expected to find Frances reading, like she used to, waiting. Instead, he saw dance shoes at the threshold, size 12, not his. Inside, under the faint yellow lamp, Frances sat on the edge of the bed, her slip half draped over her hips. A young dancer, Thomas Reed, leaned close, his hand sliding into her hair, lips hovering near her shoulder. Thomas wasn't a stranger. He was a protege, someone Miles had introduced to the world. The room was almost completely silent. No frantic movements. No shouting. Just betrayal unfolding like choreography. Miles stepped in. For a moment, no one moved. Frances' eyes widened. Thomas froze. Miles grabbed the brass table lamp from the nightstand and hurled it across the room. It smashed into the wardrobe. Glass shattered across the floor. Still, he said nothing. That was the coldest part. He turned around and walked out. No accusations. No pleas. No performance. Just absence. Frances moved out soon after. Miles disappeared from stages for 3 months, retreating deeper into heroin, isolating himself inside studio walls that once felt sacred. New York whispered. The jazz legend whose wife was stolen by his own protege. Miles Davis had faced critics, racism, violence, addiction. But that night, he faced something else. Vulnerability. Years later, when someone asked why he couldn't forgive, Miles said only one sentence. I was never afraid of losing anyone until that night. The lamp shattered wood and glass. But what truly broke was the illusion that genius makes you invincible. Because even the coolest man in jazz can't improvise his way out of betrayal. Barry White, the signature that broke the king. Barry White's voice didn't just sing love. It wrapped around you. Low, slow, unshakable. When he spoke, it felt like velvet sliding across skin. Millions of women melted to that sound. He built an empire on romance. But on August 14th, 1982, romance became paperwork. Barry had just returned from London, exhausted but content. The European tour had gone well. Money was flowing. Legacy secure. His wife, Glodden James, wasn't just his partner home. She was his business ally. Together, they built deals, negotiated contracts, ran their world like a kingdom. Or so he thought. At 12:45 a.m., he pushed open the door to his private study, the one room in the house that felt untouchable. The desk lamp cast a narrow beam across the room. That's when he saw them. Glodden sitting on the edge of his desk. Not on a bed, not in shadows. On his desk, her bare legs draped over the lap of Kevin Ross, his personal manager, the man who handled his money, the man he trusted with signatures. Kevin was holding a pen, signing a check, ink spreading across the paper, slow, deliberate, like it was draining something out of Barry himself. This wasn't just physical betrayal. It was financial, strategic, calculated. Barry stepped closer and noticed something on the floor. A condom wrapper near a bottle of cologne he used to mock his cheap. Kevin looked up. Barry didn't shout. He calmly snatched the check from Kevin's hand and studied the signature. Forged, clean, efficient. He threw it back onto the desk. No screaming, no broken glass. Instead, he reached for the wedding album resting on a shelf nearby, closed it gently, tucked it under his arm, and walked out. That was the night Barry White understood something brutal. You can serenade the world and still be a spectacle in your own home. Months later, Glodden publicly dated Kevin. Promotional contracts collapsed. His European momentum vanished. He spiraled into depression, gaining nearly 50 pounds as headlines mocked him. The love king can't keep his own queen. Barry's voice never changed. On stage, It still poured like honey. But inside, the man who once whispered promises to millions had learned that love, when mixed with power and money, doesn't always sound like music. Sometimes it sounds like a pen, scratching across a check you never agreed to sign. Isaac Hayes, the song that turned on him. Isaac Hayes was larger than life. Shaved head, gold chains, dark glasses, a voice so deep it felt carved from earth itself. When he sang Walk On By, it wasn't just a cover, it was a command. He believed in loyalty, especially for Minion, his wife and backstage manager. She traveled with him, organized his world, stood just behind the curtain while crowds roared his name. On March 16, 1973, in Detroit's Statler Hilton Hotel, the curtain never rose. It was 12:20 a.m. when Isaac returned from a show. The hallway smelled of smoke and brandy. As he pushed open a hotel suite door, 2 signed concert tickets lay on the floor, tickets he had personally autographed for Minion earlier that night. Next to them, a velvet wine-colored jacket, Jerome's jacket. Jerome wasn't just a guitarist. He was family, a brother in rhythm, a man Isaac had defended in arguments and trusted on tour. The room felt heavy. From a cassette player in the corner, Walk On By was playing softly, Isaac's own voice filling the air like cruel irony. On the sofa, Minion knelt, her thin nightgown slipping down her hips. Jerome leaned over her, lips brushing her neck, one hand holding an unsigned check. Isaac stopped breathing. For a second, it looked staged, like a scene from a bad script. His music, his wife, his bandmate. Minion looked up. "You can write 100 songs," she said, her voice steady. "But you can't write one warm night." That was the blade. Isaac stepped forward, opened a drawer, and pulled out a thick tour contract. Without hesitation, he tore it in half. Paper ripped loud and final. Jerome stood silent. Minion didn't chase him. 2 months later, she moved out. Memphis newspapers whispered, "The King of Soul betrayed on tour." Isaac withdrew from the studio, canceled projects, cut off contact with his band for 6 months. Revenue dropped nearly 40%. But the deepest fracture wasn't financial. It was personal. His daughter chose sides. The family splintered. The house grew quiet. Isaac Hayes once believed his voice could fill any room. But that night in Detroit, he learned something devastating. No matter how powerful your music is, it can't compete with absence. And sometimes the song playing in the background isn't romance. It's the soundtrack to your own humiliation. David Ruffin, the robe on the door. David Ruffin had a voice that could stop time. When he sang My Girl, it felt like forever had a melody. As the golden lead of the Temptations, he stood in sharp suits under blinding lights, adored, envied, untouchable. But on November 22, 1969, forever lasted exactly one hallway. He came home to his Detroit apartment after a long night, whiskey on his breath, pride bruised from a lost poker game. The building was quiet, ordinary, until he saw it. A gray men's bathrobe hanging loosely from his bedroom doorknob. Not his. The smell of unfamiliar cigarette smoke lingered in the air, thick, recent. On the dressing table sat a torn condom wrapper tangled among Jenna's makeup. David didn't rush. He didn't shout. He walked to the bedroom door and pushed it open. Jenna sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in that robe, her hair messy, eyes wide, and beside her, the young drummer from the Temptations, a man David had mentored, protected, treated like a younger brother. The drummer's hands trembled as he buttoned his pants. No music played, no dramatic confrontation, just a silence so sharp it cut. David stared for a moment, long enough to understand everything. Then he turned. The whiskey bottle slipped from his fingers and shattered against the floor. Glass scattered across the hardwood, like something fragile finally exposed. He didn't fight, didn't throw punches. He walked out. But humiliation has a way of following you onto the stage. Later that year, tensions inside the Temptations reached a breaking point. Substance abuse, ego clashes, internal fractures. David was fired from the group that made him famous. Some say it was inevitable, but those close to him knew the timing wasn't coincidence. He spiraled deeper into addiction, deeper into isolation. The man who once commanded arenas became a headline of decline. Here's the cruel irony. David Ruffin made millions believe in loyalty when he sang about love. But the night he saw that robe hanging on his door, he realized something devastating. Being idolized by the world means nothing if you're betrayed in your own bedroom. And sometimes the loudest of all happens in complete silence. Curtis Mayfield, 3 feet away. Curtis Mayfield didn't shout to be powerful. He whispered truth. People get ready. Move on up. His music carried conscience, clarity, calm strength. He was a moral compass of soul, the quiet revolutionary with a guitar. But on September 12, 1975, backstage at Soul Train, he stood 3 feet away from a truth he couldn't sing away. The studio buzzed with laughter, hairspray, and last-minute tuning. Curtis had just stepped off stage, applause still echoing in his ears. He was looking for his wife, the woman who had stood beside him through rising fame and endless touring. He found her near the makeup table. Too close. She stood facing a young saxophone player who had recently joined the band. His hand rested low on her back, fingers tracing the fabric of her dress. She leaned in, whispering something that made them both laugh. Intimate, careless laughter. They didn't see him. Curtis froze, 3 feet away, close enough to hear her breath, close enough to step in, close enough to stop it. He didn't. An assistant later said Curtis' face went pale, like the sound had drained from him. He gently removed a handkerchief from his pocket and placed it on the makeup table, slow, deliberate, as if marking the moment. "You know what you're doing," he said quietly, not angry, not broken, just certain. Then he turned and walked away. He canceled 3 shows in New Orleans within days, losing nearly $80,000 in deposits. The press speculated about exhaustion, creative differences. No one knew the real reason. They never publicly divorced. But those close to them said they slept in separate rooms for the next 12 years. When Curtis was paralyzed in a tragic stage accident in 1990, she remained by his side, loyal in public, silent in private. They never spoke of that night again. Here's what makes Curtis Mayfield's story different. There was no smash glass, no screaming, no dramatic exit, just restraint. Sometimes betrayal doesn't explode. It lingers. It turns into a quiet distance that stretches across years, across hospital rooms, across dinner tables, across lives lived side by side, but never fully together. Curtis once wrote songs that told the world to move forward. But that night backstage, standing 3 feet away, he learned something harder. You can be strong enough to fight injustice and still choose silence when your own heart is breaking. Bobby Womack, the hotel bill. Bobby Womack's life was already tangled in scandal when 1970 delivered another blow. He thought he had survived the worst. Public backlash, broken trust, industry whispers. But betrayal doesn't knock once. It waits. Barbara Cooke didn't scream when she confronted him. She didn't cry either. She simply placed a hotel bill on the table. Chicago, Suite 503. 2 nights. A young female tour manager, 15 years younger. Proof doesn't argue. It sits there. Bobby denied it at first, loud, defensive, desperate. But Barbara's face didn't change. Then she walked to the wardrobe and pulled out a small handgun. Friends rushed in, holding her arm, talking her down for nearly 20 minutes. The air was thick with something irreversible. 3 days later, she filed for divorce. $250,000 demanded, a fortune at the time. Motown distanced itself. Performance contracts vanished. Within a year, Bobby lost nearly 70% of his income. The press didn't call it heartbreak. They called it disgrace. Here's the tragedy. Bobby Womack wasn't destroyed by being betrayed. He was destroyed by becoming the man who betrayed. And sometimes the most humiliating stain is the one you put on yourself. Ray Charles, the sound of a door closing. Ray Charles lived in darkness, but he heard everything, every shift in tone, every hesitation in breath, every lie wrapped in silence. In the late 1960s, after months on tour, Ray returned home to Georgia, hoping to surprise his wife and children. The house felt familiar under his fingertips. The railing, the wall, the soft turn into the living room. Then he heard it. Laughter. Low. Intimate. Not meant for him. In the dim glow of a lamp he couldn't see, Della sat close to a young man Ray didn't recognize. Their voices overlapped softly. Her hand rested in his. The air between them carried something unmistakable. Ray didn't shout, didn't ask questions. He stood still, like a statue carved from heartbreak. Then he turned around and closed the door. The next morning, lawyers divided more than $500,000 in assets and 3 houses. No scandal, no spectacle, just signatures. Ray never spoke her name again. Later, he told a friend, the most painful thing isn't not seeing, it's hearing your heart break clearly. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't need witnesses. It only needs silence. Smokey Robinson, the champagne glass. Smokey Robinson built a career on softness. His voice floated like silk, gentle and romantic. He wrote about forever as if it were guaranteed. And for years, Claudette, his wife, his partner through Motown's golden era, seemed woven into that promise. Until one quiet night in the early 80s. Rumors had been circling. Too much laughter backstage. Too many late rehearsals. Smokey ignored them. Love, after all, was his specialty. But curiosity is louder than denial. He pushed open the dressing room door. Without a sound, Claudette sat on the makeup table, red velvet dress lifted high on her thighs. The Miracles' young drummer stood close. Too close. One hand rested on her knee. The other held a champagne glass midair, frozen in celebration. They were laughing, not nervously, not guiltily, comfortably. Smokey didn't step inside. He didn't clear his throat. He simply watched long enough to understand, then closed the door as gently as he had opened it. He drove all night through Detroit's damp streets, headlights cutting through mist like questions with no answers. They stayed married 4 more years. But there were no more love songs at home. Just quiet rooms, separate silences. In his memoir, Smokey later admitted, I could write hundreds of love songs, but I didn't have the courage to keep that woman. Because sometimes the hardest truth isn't catching betrayal. It's realizing love alone was never enough. Sam Cooke, the photograph. Sam Cooke believed in control. Control of the stage. Control of his money. Control of his image. Fame was armor, or so he thought. By 1963, the late nights and long tours had stretched his marriage thin. Suspicion crept in quietly. Instead of confrontation, Sam chose precision. He hired a private investigator. $2,000 for clarity. A month later, the envelope arrived. Inside was a single photograph. Barbara stood outside a Chicago hotel, wrapped in a cream-colored fur coat. In her hand, a room key. Beside her, the tour manager Sam once trusted like family. There were no dramatic scenes, no broken doors, just proof. That night, Sam sat alone in his recording studio. Lights off, cigarette burning slowly between his fingers. He replayed Bring It On Home to Me over and over, a love song that suddenly felt like a confession to himself. They didn't divorce immediately. They lived in the same house, slept in the same bed, ate at the same table. But silence moved in with them. When Sam was shot and killed in 1964, Barbara wept at the funeral. Some said it was grief. Others said regret. No one knew for sure. What they did know was this. The man who sang about bringing love home discovered it had already left. And sometimes the most painful evidence isn't what you catch in the act. It's the photograph. That confirms what you already feared. Bill Withers, the cruise tickets. Bill Withers never looked like a superstar. He looked like a man who worked hard and meant what he said. When he sang Ain't No Sunshine, you believed him. When he whispered Lean on Me, it felt personal. He thought Denise Nicholas was a miracle, an Emmy-winning actress who chose him. The former factory worker turned songwriter. But success changes temperature. Fame widens distance. On May 21st, 1974, Bill walked into his lawyer's office to sign papers transferring song rights to his son. The door was slightly open. Inside, Denise sat on a polished ebony table, her silk dress loosely draped. One leg hooked around the back of Leonard, Bill's own lawyer, the man who once helped him escape poverty. On the desk, a bottle of Dom Perignon. a velvet ring box engraved "Forever," and 2 Caribbean cruise tickets dated for Bill and Denise's wedding anniversary. Denise didn't flinch. "You're not enough for me to reject a real man," she said softly. Bill placed his pen on the table and walked out. The divorce was swift. The silence afterward wasn't. He drank heavily. His liver swelled. He retreated from the industry. Years later, when Denise remarried and Leonard went bankrupt, Bill would sit alone with old manuscripts and whisper, almost to himself, "You weren't good enough." Because sometimes betrayal doesn't scream. It speaks quietly and stays with you longer. Eddie Kendricks, the illusion. Eddie Kendricks had the kind of falsetto that floated above chaos. As one of the angelic voices of the Temptations, he represented polished harmony, perfection. Fans adored him. Letters poured into the fan club office daily. Walls covered in posters of his smiling face. That office was supposed to be safe. On August 3rd, 1970, Eddie returned to Detroit quietly, intending to personally sign thank you notes for young fans battling illness. He wanted to be present. Grateful, he opened the door. Patricia, his wife, was sprawled across the reception desk in a short blue dress, her hand wrapped around the neck of the fan club manager, a devoted admirer who once cried meeting Eddie. On the floor lay scattered fan letters. On top of them, a Polaroid photo. Patricia sitting in the man's lap, her dress pulled high, Eddie's giant poster looming behind them like a silent witness. Patricia looked at him with something colder than guilt. "You're just their illusion," she said. "I need a real man." Eddie set the pen engraved with his name on the desk and walked away. Weeks later, he left the Temptations. Publicly, it was called Creative Differences. Privately, he locked himself in his apartment for months. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't just steal your partner, it steals your identity. And the hardest thing for a man worshipped by millions is hearing that none of it was real. Gil Scott-Heron, The Sidewalk. Gil Scott-Heron built his legacy on truth. Spoken word prophet, political fire, a man who called out hypocrisy wherever he saw it. Brenda, his longtime partner, was supposed to be the one place he didn't have to fight. In October 1980, after launching an anti-drug campaign, Gil drove past a New York newsroom late at night. Brenda's blue Plymouth was parked outside. Curious, he pulled over. From a driver's seat, he spotted a crumpled manuscript on the dashboard, an article criticizing him as a hypocrite. On top of it lay a handwritten note, "My love, I'm coming over tonight." He didn't storm inside. He crossed the street, through the glass. He saw Brenda resting her head on the shoulder of the very editor who had publicly humiliated him for years. She wrapped her arms around his neck. Their kiss lingered long enough for strangers to stare. Gil sat down on the curb. He pulled out his notebook. His hands trembled so hard, he almost dropped his pen. Under the streetlight, he understood something final. He wasn't just betrayed by a woman. He was betrayed by alignment. That night, he went home and started writing what would become the bottle. Because sometimes the sidewalk becomes your confessional. And sometimes a revolution ends quietly with the man who preached truth, learning he can't outrun it at home. Chuck Berry, The Notebook. Chuck Berry trusted rhythm more than people. Rock and roll obeyed him. Crowds moved when he told them to. But love? Love had its own tempo. On September 12, 1969, after a show in Nashville, Chuck slipped backstage, guitar string still broken in his hand. Through a gap in the curtain, he saw his wife, the Meta, walking arm in arm with the band's new bass player, a young man nearly 20 years her junior. They weren't kissing. They didn't need to. They walked close, comfortable, familiar. Later, in the dressing room, Chuck opened her suitcase. Inside, beneath folded clothes, he found a small brown notebook. Dates, motel names, room numbers. The entries began April 2nd, 1969, the same week Chuck returned from a European tour. He closed the notebook slowly. He didn't confront her, didn't ask questions, because deep down, he feared hearing the truth out loud. Instead, paranoia moved in. Hidden cameras appeared in his studio. Trust evaporated. He traveled alone in his tour bus, distant, suspicious, untouchable. Years later, he would mumble to an old bandmate, "I'm not sure where they went that night, but it wasn't back to me." Because sometimes betrayal isn't loud. It's written down. And sometimes the scariest thing a man can read is proof he was never the only one. Luther Ingram, the open Bible. Luther Ingram didn't need to see bodies tangled in sheets to understand betrayal. Sometimes faith makes it worse. On March 4th, 1977, after 3 exhausting weeks on tour, Luther pulled into his Memphis driveway at 3 a.m. He imagined his wife stirring awake, wrapping her arms around him, asking about the road. Instead, he heard a man's voice, soft, gentle, singing a hymn. It was coming from the bedroom. The door was slightly open. Through the crack, Luther saw his wife sitting on the edge of the bed. Across from her sat their local pastor, the same man who had blessed their wedding years earlier. An open Bible rested on their laps. Beneath it, partially hidden, was a folded piece of paper. On it were handwritten words, "Please forgive me." Their hands were clasped tightly. Not lust, not chaos, something slower, more deliberate, more devastating. Luther stood there longer than he should have, long enough to understand that this wasn't a moment. It was a history. He didn't shout, didn't confront the pastor. He closed the door quietly and walked back into the dark hallway. The next morning, he drove straight to the studio. In 3 hours, he wrote "If loving you is wrong, I don't want to be right." The lyrics bled. He never publicly spoke about that night. No dedication ever accompanied that song. Near the end of his life, someone asked if he had forgiven her. Luther only said, "There are things forgiveness can't save." Because sometimes betrayal isn't sinful passion. Sometimes it's wrapped in scripture. And that cuts deeper than anything else. Otis Redding, the envelope. Otis Redding didn't need drama to feel devastation. He carried emotion in his voice like it was oxygen. When he sang "These Arms of Mine," you believe those arms held something sacred. On October 14th, 1966, after a 7-hour drive from Georgia to Memphis, Otis stopped by the recording studio unannounced. The hallway lights were dim. Through the glass of the control room, he saw her. His wife sat in a leather chair. Beside her, a young piano player Otis had mentored. They weren't tangled together. They weren't desperate. They were calm. Her head rested gently on his shoulder. Their hands intertwined over a sheet of music. "These Arms of Mine." On the corner of the page, written in unfamiliar handwriting. Take 3, October 14th, 66. For us. Otis didn't burst in. He didn't shout. He stood there long enough for the truth to settle, then quietly turned away and closed the door so softly they never knew he had been there. 3 months later, on December 10th, 1967, Otis died in a plane crash at just 26 years old. When they recovered his suitcase from the wreckage, they found an unsealed envelope. Inside were 4 words, written diagonally in blue ink. "I knew everything." He never confronted her. He carried it with him instead. Because sometimes the deepest heartbreak isn't spoken. It's sealed and taken to the grave. Behind the platinum records, behind the sold-out arenas, behind the velvet voices and roaring crowds, these men were still just husbands who opened one door too many. Fame didn't protect them. Money didn't shield them. And love wasn't always enough. If this story shocked you, wait until you realize how many legends carried their heartbreak in silence. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe, and stay with us. Because sometimes the greatest hits were born from the deepest betrayals.